What's up, guys? Chris, Legendary Mana, and it's time for Tech Tuesdays. The purpose of this series is to sort of give you an idea as somebody who's getting ready to go to, say, GP Portland or doing any other large event that's coming up, the process that I take to sort of decide what direction am I going, or what are the hottest decks being played right now, and what are the ones that I need to sort of focus on. Either A, understand what I'm up against, or B, what are some of the decks that are beating these decks that are winning. This particular episode, I'm going to focus on the World Championship event coverage. What decks did well, what decks are doing well, and figure out what is the next step. What going into GP Portland, which is happening in about a month and a half, what am I gonna predict is going to be the next set of meta going into that GP? And there are several things that I look at. I will sit there and look at the decks that are being played and winning. I will then load them up and start playing them and testing them and seeing, okay, how does this deck work? I mean, you could see a deck on paper and exactly, what the lines they're taking, but without doing your reconnaissance, like your homework on what makes a deck tick, sometimes you're going into a fight blind. And that's not a good feeling. So for those who want to know what are the steps that I take, this is the show that is going to give you those steps. So the first thing I'm looking at is the final standings for Worlds. And obviously, if you've been paying attention, you know that William Jensen won. He had an astounding run, and he was playing amazing Magic. So I had a lot of fun watching him play and I'll leave a link below to the finals. And, just the way that he played Magic is very textbook and very using every bit of mana, using every bit of his resources that are available to him, pretty much to a T. I mean, damn near perfect, right? I mean, obviously, the guy's a pro. There's a reason why he's a pro. But even some of the greatest pros have bad periods of playing Magic. And they'll admit that to you. And they'll say, I just had a bad season. And it happens a lot. So anyways, let's get into it and sort of just look at William Jensen's list. And we'll go down the list and sort of just break this down. MTG Goldfish does a really good job at showing all of the lists that were there and sort of giving you top cards, top creatures, top spells. Now, a couple things that I've already noticed off the bat, especially watching the championship and seeing the cards that are showing up on regular at a high percentage. There's barely any Ixalan in any of these decks. You see Rampaging Ferocidon, right? Like that card shows up. It's a good card too. But you don't really see many other cards except for Lightning Strike. I think Lightning Strike, right here, number 3. Lightning Strike deals 3 damage to target creature or player. And that comes up, there's 40 copies in the field, 41% of the decks. That's a pretty high amount. That's a good card. And for a format that has a diverse amount of removal, it's pretty good. Obviously, a Braid, one of the top cards that was played because, there was a lot of red played. In fact, I think a Braid overall, Braid overall was the top card. Number 2 was Chandra Torture Defiance. Number 3, I haven't even hit 3 yet. Number 3, Glorybringer. Number 4, Bombat Courier. Earthshaker Kenra, Hazard the Fervent, Lightning Strike, Negate, Soulscar Mage, and Harness Lightning. So I'm looking at this, and 2 things come to mind already. 1, energy, and that's not even looking at the list. 1 is energy, and the other one is some sort of mono red variant. Okay, so we saw a ton of that, and very little of everything else, except there was blue-black control. So going over here, let's see, at the bottom of the list, Temur Energy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. Temur Energy list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Or there was 9 Temur Energy. There was 9 Ramunap Red, 1, 2, 3 Black Control, and well, because that's 4. Okay, so and then 1 Grixis Control. So, and it's not a huge wide, deck list. So let's go ahead and expand them all, and we get to see. I like this feature that MTG Goldfish has. So you can see the list, and then you can expand them and scroll down. So let's take a look really quick. William Jensen's list is an outstanding list. I mean, but this is also textbook Temur Energy. This is a deck that we've seen quite a lot, and not very much difference in most of these lists, except for his list. Commit to Memory in the main board, Confiscation Coup in the main board, which is, both of these are good now to be in the main board because we're in more of a aggro format, right? So, Tune with Ether, Magma Spray, Braid, Essence Scatter. I mean, these are all usual suspects in the build, and he's using Chandra Defeat in the sideboard, Braid, second of Braid, negate Ether Sphere Harvester, Appetite for the Unnatural, Supreme Will, Chandra, Glimmer Genius, interesting. So his list, some of the older lists had 4 glimmers. This does not. So that's interesting. Probably for tempo and speed, Confiscation Coup, and Torrential Gearhulk in the sideboard. Very interesting. I've been seeing a lot of Torrential Gearhulk coming out of the sideboard now instead of the main board. So something kind of to look out for if you are holding copies of Torrential Gearhulk. Could see a slight dip in, let's see, is it even, yeah, it's already starting to it's ticking back up. But from Our Devastation release to Ixalan release, it has dipped about $3. So something to just look at. But keep in mind, the swing for Torrential Gearhulk is pretty crazy. Up and down, up and down, up and down. So just something to kind of just take note of. So the Ramunap Red for Javier Dominguez is a pretty standardized red deck. Nothing really surprising here, except they've started putting Lightning Strike in the main board. 4 ofs for Shock, Braid, Lightning Strike. 1 of Chandra, which is pretty typical. Hazaret, On-Crop Crasher, Karizev, Earthshaker, Soulscar, and Bombite Carrier. I mean, this is pretty much the same list for the most part, aside from Lightning Strike, that we saw several months back. Not a really... There's no... Except for they're bringing in Rampaging Ferocidon from the sideboard, which I find interesting. I liked it, though, during the Worlds and watching it. It really does well. I like it. Blue-black control. I like this list using Scarab God. Very much into using that card. Torrential Gearhulk coming in as a 3 of in the main. This card is great. It unfortunately is not seeing a ton of play in competitive play just yet, but I think give it some time and it will. I think this is only the first wave of seeing that card. Also, Vraska's Contempt. I mean, this is a really solid deck. Even though it placed third, I think with some tweaks and getting some speed to combat Ramunap Red, I think it'll show much better in the near future. So another blue-black control by Calvin Chu, which he is pretty much mirrors the Josh Utterlayton deck, except he's using only 2 Aztec as Kent does, and he's using 4 glimmers instead of hieroglyphic illuminations. So, a little bit different tech here and there, but primarily the same. Going down the list, most of these, as you will see, and I'll leave a link below to this list. And, again, these are all pretty much almost the same. There's not a ton of variance between all of the different blue-black decks. Same thing with, Shota always has very fun and interesting decks. This is something that I was trying to build previously with limited success, but I think Vraska's Contempt brings it over into the Grixis control magic, as well as search for as Kanta. It really complements the deck well, right? It allows you to look at cards and fish and get to cards that you need and what's coming up and what's next. So I'd say look for this particular deck to start rising up slightly. I think at some point somebody's going to strike a chord with this deck. I would even bet that this would be a deck that we would see in the Pro Tour coming up soon. I'm curious to see. I didn't get a chance to see all of Shota's games and matches, so I'd like to see where the pitfalls were, but I'm very much wanting to see where does this deck go, because I like this deck a lot. And then Ramunap Red, most of them, these are all, you can look at them for yourself, but these are all pretty much the same. Same thing with the 4-color energy. Slight variances here and there, like playing with the amount of copies of Harness Lightning versus Confiscation Coup, and then Glimmer of Genius versus Chandra's balance. Some of them are playing, different combinations of the creatures. So, but I'd say for the majority, the decks are virtually the same. So before we sort of move on, the thing is doing your homework and looking at what is being played is very important, and building these decks and playing them is very important. Now, people will tell you, oh, net decking, it's bad or whatever. The thing about net decking, in this instance, it's homework, it's reconnaissance, it's what you need to do to understand better how the deck operates, how it functions, what is, the next play for this deck. So there's nothing wrong and no shame in building these decks to understand how they tick better. So I'm going to leave you with a deck other than the Grixis control deck, which I'm very interested in building and seeing where it goes. What are some other decks that I see that might be making the Pro Tour and could see some valid play? So in MTG Goldfish, you have the standard metagame, and it just shows you. And obviously, Ramunap Red, Temur Energy are all in the top 24 to 25% of the meta. It's huge. It's really huge. But there are 2 decks that I'm looking at that I really like that are doing well. And White's Blue Control is a very interesting deck. It does well in competitive standard leagues, as you see 5-0s. And this deck is doing well in competitive leagues. You see here 5-0, 5-0, 5-0. I'm not sure. Here's some of these. Dallas 4th, 5th, and it showed up a lot in Dallas. And so the deck is kind of overperforming. And I can even see, let's see. Sultai Energy, Ramunap Red, Sultai Energy. So here we go. White, blue control, Temur Energy. So it's up there with these. The next one in line that I'm looking here, here's another Grixis control by Scott McNamara. It's a little slightly different than Shota's deck, but running 3 Scarab Gods versus Shota's running 1. He's running Nicol Bolas instead of. So I think I'm still gonna lean towards Shota's. But I might look at some of these pieces and say, okay, what are some of the pieces that are working here that might work in that deck, right? But anyways, these are sort of the things that I'm looking at. White-blue control is pretty good. I like Shota's deck, Grixis control. These are sort of those decks that are on the outside that are looking in, and they could easily start doing some major damage. I think in the very moment, I'm looking at Grixis control being the next phase of standard. I could be wrong. That's just my guess. Sultai Energy is doing okay too, but I think Grixis control, Temur Energy, Ramunap Red, white-blue control, those are going to be your top 4 come Pro Tour. Until next time, this was Tech Tuesday. I bid you farewell.